But this would not matter. The Nazis decided to try to revitalize their economy by going to war again, maybe not a major war but a war they wanted. They invaded Dubois's France through their puppet regime of Burgundy. They would capture Paris within 4 days of the war as soldiers retreated out of the city in order to not damage the city and held a defensive line behind it that was breached within impact of the Nazi army hitting its line of defense. The Italian in response, as France hasn't fully entered the Italian sphere of influence yet, a proxy war begun. The Italians would rush to create a new defensive line to hold out the Nazis from pushing any further. Eventually a stalemate was reached immediately as the two superpowers' armies met, first in Grenoble, later in Vichy and lastly La Rochelle. After just 2 months of no progress for both powers, Italy reached out to the Nazis to discuss peace before it would further escalate into something bigger. Italy was not ready yet at a full-blown war with the Nazis as they still haven't finished testing their new nuclear weapons. The Nazis agreed with redrawing the border and switching some of the occupations between the powers. Nazi France would be turned into a Reichskommissariat and Italian France would be fully annexed by Italy and start being Romanized. This wasn't yet over for the Nazis, as this wasn't enough. For this whole time, in the slumbers of Siberia, many of the warlord states tried to rise to prominence but falls quickly as instability rises across the lands. Himmler approaches Hitler with a new proposition: how to tame the Russian bear and prevent significant insurrection in their Reichskommissariat of Moscowian. Plan Unconquerable Bear, a long-term operation that would start by funding some close Nazi Russian sympathizer and to create a new large Russian state that would be independent from the Nazis. This would show the Russians still residing in their Reichskommissariats that there is a home for them in Siberia. This would hopefully attract the Russians, and perhaps other Slavic groups too, to voluntarily migrate out into Siberia. Moreover, later stages of the operation would involve sending troops and weapons to help the regime grow, hopefully to kick-start the economy further. Hitler agreed to this plan and would progressively be implemented. To the city of Syktyvkar, a man by the name of Tabariki arrived, Sayajid Tabariki. A Tsarist Russia patriot and a Nazi cooperator. Early on during the war he cooperated closely with the SS and after the war helped the SS create Hitlerjugend organizations in the Reichskommissariat Moscowian exclusive for Russians that would be considered worthy enough, or fit enough, or for those that already had honorary Aryan status. Syktyvkar was the capital city of the very politically unstable Komi Republic. He started campaigning with funds from the SS, wide-spreading his monarchist and National Socialist views. Early on he would let the SS to send their agents to kill, imprison or frame political opponents. He would quickly surge in popularity and eventually in the next election would get a sweeping majority of 74%. From there he would abolish all democratic institutions and establish a regency council, where he would lead as the regent. A big claim he gave to justify his monarchy was that Alexei Nikolaevich, the son of Tsar Nicholas II, is still alive and was not killed by Bolshevik insurgents that killed the entire royal family. Many have doubted his claim of him being alive, but he would be in search of Alexei and return the throne of Russia back to its divine owner. From this point on, he would establish a large army that would start by raiding nearby states, but later on would invade the Russian military and socialist states. In the meantime, so far the Socialist Republic of Kazakhstan was the most powerful militarily and resource-wise power in the Siberian anarchy, therefore in order to give Tabariki an easier job, the Wehrmacht made an invasion of Kazakhstan, which now also owned more of the Central Asia region but also Russian parts. This invasion would be very rough as guerrilla warfare would be very present. This proxy war lasted for 6 years until it ended in 1960, dissolving all territories of the socialist and giving it up to a bunch of disorganized generals. For these 6 years, Tabariki's Russia started to be larger and more powerful by the day. By now he controlled most of the northwestern regions of Siberia and started advancing in the chaotic region of what previously was under socialists Kazakhstan's rule. As Hitler's condition worsened as he was diagnosed with Parkinson's diseases all the way back in 1944. Once he saw the current success of Himmler's plan at controlling Russia so successfully, in order to prevent this from being sabotaged by one of his other members who may see exiling Himmler and all the other opponents of his as a good way to handle the situation of the Reich, might crumble Taborski's regime and make lead to the collapse of the Reich. With this in his mind, on January 30, 1962 he made a public speech in Germania stating that Heinrich Himmler is the official successor to the greater Nazi Reich. This seriously angered the many competing figures. Unfortunately for them, there would be nothing they could do about it. Assassinating Himmler may just worsen the problem, and even in that case most probably Goebbels would be second in line. On May 6, 1962, Adolf Hitler dies, ending a tyrannical rule, but opening the gates to an even more tyrannical rule under Heinrich Himmler. Starting from that day, Himmler would start to incorporate his new cabinet of the Nazi Party. As his closest advisor, Goebbels would be. From here, he would start to impose many of his maniac policies and many of his crazy conspiracies and ideas into motion. He would on a massive scale start converting everyone to a slightly curved version of Nordic paganism, Nordic neo-paganism. He cracked down on any other faith, indirectly denouncing Italy as much of their identity is rooted in Catholicism. With this in mind, he replaced all Christian churches with new neo-pagan ones, which still had some beautiful cathedral-style architecture but painted black and different shades of grey. They got rid of all Christian symbols in them and replaced them with Nazi, SS and new pagan symbols. The same was made with any mosques and Jewish synagogues. Although most Jewish synagogues were already destroyed and any that remained were destroyed anyway as they did not fit into Himmler's vision. Back in the Americas, Dwight Eisenhower ran for re-election in 1956 and won. Now he has been succeeded by John F. Kennedy as the Democratic nominee and win the 1960 election. He was nominated after a fierce battle within the Democratic Party and the Dixiecrats, who have become the Nazi sympathizers in the U.S. They became prominent as far back as 1952, when they first tried to take the nomination against Eisenhower but failed due to his position in the American nation, as Nazi propaganda films that managed to find their way to the U.S. would fuel some anti-Semitism and racism towards black people, boosting the support of the Dixiecrats who wanted to bring back slavery, and some members of the Dixiecrats became serious Nazi sympathizers. It still would not be enough for them to win, but fortunately for Kennedy he had a plan to combat the Dixiecrats. It almost would have gone out of control if not the CIA, which not until 1961 started to deal with the problem effectively. He would push on the civil rights issue, and try to get more minorities to vote for him. He also seriously appealed the rich capitalist and progressives by promoting entrepreneurial and lowering regulation, but also placing many pro-natalist benefits and welfare, all while keeping taxes relatively low. He would push on further military cooperation with the International Republic, making many collaboratory training sessions with other members of the alliance. He also reorganized the alliance into more of a globalist peacekeeping alliance. He established an actual Senate with given powers. It also turned into an economic and political union. In Italy, Julius Toscani got married with Maria Kedzierska, a Polish immigrant from Poznań, who with her family escaped the Nazi regime by escaping to Hungary and later seeking immigrant status in Italy. On January 20, 1962, she would give birth to a son, Marcus Toscani, named after the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius. As the years progress, his regime would progressively become more stable, imposing many liberal economic policies, turning them into significant economic growth. Quality of life gets progressively better, the economy grew. His relationship with Maria made him very sympathetic towards the Polish people, further fueling his antagonistic stance towards the Nazi Reich. He would give up an entire province for the many Polish refugees near the city of Udine, making it a hotspot for Polish refugees seeking to later continue the fight against Nazism. As Rome further distances itself and starts to be antagonistic towards Germania, Julius starts to establish foreign relations with the International Republic, especially the United States. In Japan, as events transpire everywhere else, the economy temporarily stagnates and even drops for a moment, as it becomes very costly to maintain some parts of their empire. In addition, a new youth movement emerges that called for taking away the power from the military and giving more power to the shogun and the parliament. This movement became prominent thanks to figures like Inijiro Asanuma, a Japanese socialist and pacifist, and many other progressive and liberal figures. They would go as far as gaining support even amongst many younger officers. They would be very popular in Japan's parliamentary elections. Even a riot outside the Japanese parliament occurred in which even military young officers participated. This began a move for another restoration, the Showa Restoration. It would finally be also pushed by the emperor himself, and would begin a new restoration. It would focus on opening relations with the United States, empower both the emperor and the parliament, and change any policies focusing on racial Japanese purity, changing it to achieving cultural purity. This restoration would be finalized on September 22, 1962. This restoration would further liberalize the economy. After this restoration and all the policies that came with it, the expenses of the empire dropped, and the economy grew not only due to the drop in expenses, but also due to the free market, which started to grow now more rapidly. In July of 1964, John F. Kennedy would be assassinated. His assassination was not a one-man operation, as it was organized a white supremacist, Dixiecrat group called the Dixiecrat Separatists Movement. This made the Democratic Party have to quickly look for a new running nominee, as JFK has been already running his campaign for a few months. For the 1964 election, the Dixiecrats have manipulated the results of the emergency Democratic primary and get the current president of the Dixiecrats, John Wagner. Unfortunately for Wagner, he managed to lose the election by a landslide, winning only in Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Vermont, and Texas, getting only 67 electoral votes. He lost against not a particularly popular but much preferred candidate, Barry M. Goldwater, who as of his candidacy wasn't a really good candidate but was seen as a much better option than Wagner. He still did oppose the Civil Rights Act, but he didn't want to bring back slavery like Wagner and turn America into a puppet of the Nazis. His presidency would be lackluster, but it would see a massive twist. Wagner, regardless his embarrassing loss in the election, still wanted to take power and impose his ludicrous ideas. He would gather his most loyal members and try to expand their propaganda further. They made their own radio station, hang posters in as many places as possible. They went as far as hacking into TV networks and playing their propaganda on it. But then a key action was made. In spirit of the Confederation, on January 26, 1965, in Louisiana, New Orleans, one of the states most influenced by the Dixiecrats, organized an insurrection, the Dixie Insurrection. He started this insurrection expecting it to be a starting point for an entire civil war in which they would bring back the Confederacy and make it an independent state. They started by raiding the local armories and taking most of the guns, after which they tried to burn anything they were unable to grab. They prioritized gathering as much ammunition as possible. After the first attack, they immediately raided the police station, capturing any uncooperative officers that didn't believe in the Dixie movement, killing some of them right on the spot. After that, they breached the Louisiana Capitol, captured all Republican and non-Dixiecrat Democrats, gathering them in the middle of the Senate and taken in as hostages. After this, they blocked of all roads out of the city and started attacking and burning down or seizing any business that belonged to a black person or to a Jew. Any property belonging to either one race would be also burned down. This set a large part of the city aflames. Out of this chaos, Goldwater had to do something. He quickly ordered his generals to take care of the situation military, sending in 12,000 soldiers to avert the crisis. The amount, he said, was a great understatement of how big this insurrection actually was, as there was more than 30,000 Dixiecrats taking the streets of New Orleans. Hopefully, Goldwater wanted to try the diplomatic approach, by negotiating peace and to minimize casualties. To his information, not yet did he know what fully was going on in New Orleans. He still didn't know about the burning of black homes and businesses. After more information came and he got a reply from Wagner saying they demand independence and recognition, which was an unacceptable response for Goldwater, and learning about the true size and terror of the insurgents. He immediately ordered another 56,000 soldiers to join the fight.